All right, so ready to dive into another deep dive. This time, we're heading down south, Atlanta to be exact. Late 20th century, think high society, think those old money families, but with a twist. We're about to unravel a story where race, power, and a murder plot collide. And let me tell you, this one took almost 2 decades to untangle.
Yeah, and it's a stark reminder that justice sometimes, well, it takes a long and winding road to actually prevail.
For sure, for sure. At the center of it all, we've got Lita McClinton Sullivan. Picture this. She's a leading light in Atlanta's black community, style icon, the whole package. But her husband, Jim Sullivan, well, let's just say he came from a totally different world.
And that clash of worlds, that's something we'll be unpacking today. It's like, how did these two, from such different backgrounds, end up on this tragic collision course?
Right, so let's rewind the clock back to 1976. Jim's fresh off the boat from New England, lands in Georgia to take over his uncle's liquor business. And then he meets Lita. She's the epitome of Atlanta elegance, working at a high-end boutique. I mean, come on, you can practically see the sparks flying. Whirlwind romance, bam, they're married.
Yeah.
But this fairy tale, it takes a dark turn pretty quickly, am I right?
Oh, absolutely. And to get why things went south so fast, we've got to understand where they came from, Lita, she came from a successful black family, deep roots in Atlanta. They were practically royalty, right? Jim, he was the outsider, inheriting a business, thrown into a culture that was, let's be honest, probably pretty alien to him.
Talk about a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
It's like oil and water trying to mix. And from what journalist Deb Miller Landau found, she wrote that book, A Devil Went Down to Georgia. Their marriage, let's just say, those cracks started showing early on. And it wasn't just, different taste in music or something.
Right. Landau, she dug deep into this case, and what she found was a pattern of control from Jim. And I'm not talking about your typical, back in the day kind of thing. This was different. He was monitoring Lita's every penny. Imagine that, every purchase scrutinized. Landau even found that Jim tried to dictate Lita's friends, like who she could and couldn't hang out with. Talk about controlling.
Whoa, that's intense. So was this just a product of the times, or was Jim something else entirely? I mean, it's giving off some serious red flags.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? While things were different back then, Jim's behavior, it seems like it crossed a line. Landau, she suggests it might have been insecurity. Maybe this need to control Lita, she's, thriving.
So we've got a marriage on the rocks, clashing personalities, and all this tension simmering beneath the surface of Atlanta's high society.
Right.
But this is just the beginning, right?
Oh, yeah. Because fast forward to 1987, things go from bad to worse. Lita, she's done, files for divorce. And get this, she's ready to fight that prenup. And back then, that was a big deal, especially if you were talking about serious money.
Challenging a prenup in the 80s? That couldn't have been easy.
You're telling me. Back then, those prenups, they were basically ironclad, especially in these high-profile cases. Lita, though, she was ready to fight. She wanted what she deserved. But just as she's about to take back her life, tragedy strikes.
And that's where our story takes a very dark turn. January 18th, 1987. It starts like any other day until a man shows up at Lita's door. He's got a dozen roses. Seems innocent enough, right? But this was no romantic gesture.
It was a hit. Lita was shot and killed. Right there in her own home. It was a brutal end to a life that had so much promise. And this wasn't just, a random act of violence. This sent shockwaves through Atlanta. I mean, especially in the black community, Lita. She was an icon.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Given the circumstances, her death, it must have hit everyone hard.
Oh, absolutely. It was like someone had, snuffed out this bright light. And of course, everyone's looking at Jim, even though he's miles away down in Florida. But suspicion, that's not enough, right?
Right. You need that rock-solid evidence, which, let's be honest, in a case like this, must have been incredibly hard to come by.
You're telling me this investigation, it was a mess? They found these phone records, calls from Georgia right around the time of the murder to Jim's mansion in Florida, but they couldn't pin it on him. And then get this, 1992, the feds, they had to drop the charges.
Oh, man. Devastating. For Lita's family, that must have been a punch to the gut, to come that close only to hit a brick wall.
Totally. I can't imagine what Lita's parents, Emery and Joanne McClinton, went through. But they didn't give up. They were determined to get justice for their daughter. So they filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Jim. I mean, talk about refusing to back down.
They were fighting for her, even in death. It's powerful stuff.
It really is. Their fight, it became this symbol, this testament to the strength of family, even when facing something so unimaginable.
So for years, nothing. The case goes cold, there's suspicion, but no real answers. It's like one of those mysteries that's destined to stay unsolved. But then in 1998, a break. And it came from the most unexpected place.
Talk about a plot twist. Remember Tony Harwood, the suspected hitman? Well, his girlfriend, she decided to spill the beans. And what she revealed, it blew the case wide open.
Okay, now you have to tell me. What did she say?
She said Harwood had confessed to her, admitted to being the one who pulled the trigger, and he said Jim Sullivan had hired him, paid him to kill Lita. And it gets worse. She knew how much. Jim had paid a measly $25,000 for Lita's life.
$25,000. That's it. It's just, I don't even have words.
I know. It's chilling, right? It shows you how little he valued her life. But with this new information, the authorities, they finally had what they needed. They went after Harwood, charged him with murder. But there was one problem. Jim. He'd disappeared.
Of course he did. Like, he knew they were closing in. Where'd he go?
He took off, became an international fugitive, ended up all the way in Thailand trying to blend in, escape justice, and he almost got away with it. Took them until 2002 to finally catch him there.
Wow. So Jim and the alleged hitman, they're both in custody. I bet there was a huge sense of relief. Like, finally, after all these years, maybe justice would be served.
You bet. But this wasn't over yet. This wasn't just another case. This had been dragging on for decades. It was uncharted territory.
So did Jim Sullivan ever face a jury after all this time?
He did. But of course, there's another twist. 2003, Tony Harwood. He makes a gamble, decides to make a deal. He pleads guilty to manslaughter, but in exchange, he'll testify against Jim. Risky, but for the prosecution, Harwood's testimony, that was their golden ticket.
Yeah, after all those years, his testimony, it must have been crucial.
Absolutely. Harwood, he laid it all out. The details of the murder plot, confirmed that Jim was the mastermind. He described everything leading up to Lita's death, left no room for doubt. It took a long time, but Lita's family, they finally got their day in court.
And after years of fighting, what did the jury decide?
Guilty. Unanimous. In 2006, almost 20 years after Lita's death, Jim Sullivan was convicted of murder. Sentenced to life, no parole.
Even though it couldn't bring Lita back, hearing that guilty verdict, it must have been a moment. Like, finally, some justice.
It was bittersweet, you know. Nothing can truly heal that kind of loss. But that verdict, it provided some closure. Lita's life, it mattered. Her story wouldn't be forgotten. But even with Jim behind bars, there are still questions, these loose ends that keep people wondering.
You're right. It's like, even though we know what happened, there's still this piece missing. It makes you question everything. It really does make you think, doesn't it? Like, we can look at the timeline, we see the evidence, but there's this part of him, of Jim, that's just, I don't know, unknowable.
Yeah.
What would drive someone to do something like that?
It's the question that stays with you, right? And what's so interesting is that even Landau, even after writing the book, she said Jim remains this mystery. He wouldn't talk to her, never gave his side of things, no explanation.
So it's almost like his silence speaks volumes. Like, what was going on in his head? What aren't we seeing?
Yeah, exactly. And it reminds you that even when, quote unquote, justice is served, there's this lingering uneasiness. Like, we want answers, especially with something as awful as murder. But some things we may never know.
That's a chilling thought. And it makes me want to shift gears a bit, to move away from Jim and back to Lita. It's easy to get caught up in the crime, the investigation, but at the heart of this, there's a woman whose life was cut short. Tell me about her. Who was she beyond all of this?
Well, if you read Landau's book, you get this image of a woman who was full of life, stylish, energetic. You know, she had this eye for fashion, this creativity that really shined through. But more than that, she had this inner strength, this ability to overcome anything.
You're talking about growing up in the segregated South, right? I mean, that's a whole other layer to her story.
Exactly. Imagine being one of the first Black students to integrate an all-white high school. The pressure, the prejudice. But she faced it head on. That says a lot about her character, you know?
It makes her loss even more tragic. She wasn't just a name in a headline. She had hopes, dreams, people who loved her. So much left to give.
And that's what really resonated with people, especially within the Black community. It wasn't just a crime, it was this loss of potential, this harsh reminder of how unfair the world can be.
It reminds us that behind every story like this, behind the headlines, the courtrooms, there are real people hurting.
Landau actually interviewed Lita's mother, Joanne, years later, and you can tell the pain is still there, it never goes away, and it shows you, even though there was a trial, a verdict, nothing can truly make up for that kind of loss.
Lita's story, it's got it all. Wealth, power, betrayal. But at its core, it's about her, about the people she loved, and the terrible consequences of one man's actions.
And sadly, it's a story that's still relevant today. Domestic abuse, power dynamics, fighting for equality. These are issues that haven't gone away.
It's a lot to think about, that's for sure. One last thought for everyone listening. What if Lita and Jim hadn't come from such different worlds? Would things have turned out differently? It's a question without easy answers, but it speaks to the complexity of the relationship and how much our backgrounds shape who we are.